Are you ready to do this, Matt? Matt? Heck, I'll do it myself. Punch it, Chewie! Welcome, super friends, to the Fortress of Nerditude podcast, a safe place to talk about all things in nerd and pop culture. I'm Spencer Stapleton, and my co-pilot is Spencer Stapleton. We're two nerds that just refuse to grow up. Thank you for joining us. This is episode 199. We release every Thursday morning. You can find us on the website, fortofnerd.com. We have links to iTunes, Google Music, Spotify, YouTube, Stitcher, and everywhere podcasts are available. Stop by and relax a while. If you like what you're hearing, hit that subscribe button and get us automatically each and every week in your ear holes. All by myself, don't wanna be all by myself anymore. Yeah, that's right. All right, super friends, here's the deal. Episode 199. Matt is in Walt Disney World tonight. And we had a conversation. We figured out what we wanted to do. Don't fear, don't worry. He will be here a little later in the podcast. We're going to have a movie club tonight, and as part of the movie club discussion, Matt and I recorded that ahead of time. So Matt will be here. I'm just going to be going solo for the beginning part of it. This is episode 199, which means, yes, if you are playing along at home and you are counting, next week is episode 200. Matt will return. We will be going live on Twitch video. Super friends, it's been a long time coming. A lot of you have been asking for it. I think a lot of you are going to be disappointed when you see my ugly mug, but I'm telling you, next week, when we record, we're going to be doing it live on Twitch. And then we'll, of course, put the audio to the podcast places, the iTunes, the Googles, the Spotifys, the Stitchers, and everything. But YouTube will not get the audio podcast from here on out. It will get the video version. Yay! Super excited. Super excited about that. It's going to be a big transition. It's something that we have talked about, Matt and I, and that I've been kicking around this idea for a long time. I considered doing this at episode 100, but I really wasn't feeling that I had the means of doing it back then, and that has changed. So next week, we will be live on Twitch. That's twitch.tv/FortofNerd79. I will make sure that we put the link out. I will make sure that we let everyone know. But I want to say right up here at the front of the show, I just want to repeat this. We're excited about this. We're excited about 200. But super friends, we need your help. We want questions from you. We want to be able to answer your questions next week. And that'll be our discussion. It's been 200 episodes. What questions do you have from us? Do you want to know more about the history of the podcast? Do you want to know more about our personal histories? Do you want to know something different than we don't usually talk about? Is there something that we said in a podcast forever ago that you want to nitpick at us and get us to either reevaluate our answers or explain ourselves a little bit further? Whatever it is, we don't care, as long as it's still family friendly and it fits within the theme of the podcast. We're going to answer those questions. So here's the way you can get those questions to us. A few different methods. One, you can put in an email, and that's fortofnerd@gmail.com. That's a great way. I can flag those emails and I can separate them out. Makes it real easy for me. Two, you can get on our Discord. I have a channel even set up for episode 200 where you can go and put questions ahead of time. We've already got a number of questions that have been populated in there from some of you super friends. You're amazing, wonderful people. You know who you are. But that's another place, because then I can easily go to that. I will be putting that out as part of our question of the week later on this weekend, where I will be asking for your answer to our question of the week, as well as asking for questions for us. So you can do that. The other place you can go is you can actually call in. We have a Google Voice number. It's 801-477-7687. You can call in and you can ask your question. We will play those live in real time. We will make that happen as well. And I think those are the main ways. I mean, you could put it on Instagram. The Instagram is still available. The Twitter will be available when it goes out. But the easiest ways are going to be email, the Discord, and the voicemail. But if you are with us live on Twitch that Monday night, we will also be taking questions directly in the chat. So we will be checking that. It'll be a little bit different than most of my usual streams. I won't be really interacting with the chat like I would normally do and kind of doing all the other stuff. I'm going to have some of the alerts and stuff off because we definitely want to preserve the audio integrity of the podcast. If this is your first podcast listening experience here at the Fortress of Nerditude, I'm glad you're here. I'm super grateful that you're here. But you're going to see that the audio here should be pretty decent. And the audio going back a long way is pretty decent. The first 20 episodes or so were a little rocky. I was finding my footing. We were figuring out editing. But since then, I'd say maybe around episode 12, it got a lot better. Than by 20, I was kind of more, I'd say, locked in. For the last 179 episodes, the audio quality is pretty rock solid. Occasionally we'll have one or two here or there where something went wrong, and I did my best to save it. But I want to make sure that we are preserving the audio integrity of the podcast, because that is my commitment to you, super friends, that even though we're going to be now recording these things live on Monday nights, I will still keep the audio quality the same. It will still be free and available Thursday mornings like it always is. There is never a charge for the Fortress of Nerditude. So that being said, next week's the big one. We're really, really excited. But tonight, Matt's not here. He's in Disney World. I'm just going to assume that he's A, having the time of his life. B, he's socially distancing while he's having the time of his life. C, he's probably riding on a whole bunch of rides, because from what I keep hearing, they're doing 30% capacity and they're not even necessarily filling all of that up. And D, he will tell us more about it next week, and we will get an update from Matt. And so we look forward to that, obviously. It's a little different with him not being here tonight, but we'll make do. Like I said, he will show up a little later on in the podcast. As far as my week goes, it has been a very busy week. I had a very, very, very packed work week last week. It just seemed like no matter what I did all week, no matter how much work, how much effort I put in daily, the number of things that I had to attend to, the number of tickets, the number of projects, the number of people demanding my time never ceased, never slacked off. It was just high all week long. I did some work over the weekend even to try to kind of catch up a little bit and answer some things for some people. Work is just really busy right now. Which is a good thing. I enjoy being busy, because busy makes my days go fast. It gives me stuff to do. I can focus in. I just felt this last week, though, with how kind of crazy busy it was, there was a lot of projects, things that I'm trying to work on, that I had to kind of basically just shove onto the back burner all week, because I was trying to make sure I was taking care of the users and kind of keeping on top of issues so that they could continue doing their work. So that was kind of crazy. Last week, I continued streaming on Twitch, twitch.tv/FortofNerd79, and I'm continuing doing the Bean Boozled challenge. I I regret this idea, but it's a lot of fun. For every sub that I get, I will do the Bean Boozled challenge. And what that is it's a bunch of jelly beans that come from Jelly Belly with a little wheel that you spin, and there'll be 2 flavors, but they're exactly identical. It's like the jelly bean looks the same. And so maybe you're getting blue raspberry, maybe you're getting toothpaste, maybe you're getting peach, maybe you're getting barf flavored. Last week, I ended up eating I think a toothpaste flavored one. Maybe that was the week before. Anyway, I know that I ate a stink bug flavored one last week for one of the subs during the month of September. And let me tell you, super friends, it was disgusting. I've got a video clip of it up on the Twitch channel. It was rough. It was rough. So here's the thing. I will say this. If next week, while we are recording live, if Super Friends or anyone that's on there decides to sub the channel while I'm live, I will not do the Bean Boozled challenge live, because while it'll be a lot of fun for those of you that might be watching live, just hearing me gag and gurgle on something disgusting on the audio isn't really going to translate. But what I will say is, if you sub, I will keep everything rolling, and I will film it, and I will put that up on YouTube as like a little bonus. So if that does happen live during the show, because it's episode 200, and because it is the month of September, my commitment to you, super friends, is that I will have that on there. So that's something to think about. Okay, what else happened? Oh, I think I may have a broken bone in my foot. I haven't seen a doctor. I'm going to state that right now. I didn't even go to WebMD. I didn't do the traditional, like, let me look up my symptoms online. Oh, look, I'm dead already. No, I didn't do that. I didn't go to WebMD. I don't know what happened. Maybe it was I stepped out of my truck or something, but there's a bone in my right foot that, and I'm assuming it's a bone because I've done this before in the past, about like a decade ago, but I stepped down and I felt a sharp pain. And then no matter how I tried to walk, I could still feel it. Now, if I walked on the inside of my right foot a little bit, the pain lessened a little bit. But if I walk straight down on the, on the flat kind of part of my foot, keeping the pressure evenly distributed, I can feel it. And if I put pressure on the outside of my right foot and put that down first, that let me tell you, that hurts. That's it's sharp. It's a nice how do you do, good morning and welcome to you. I know from a decade ago that I just cracked a bone, and there's nothing you can do about it. You basically just let it heal up. And I'm pretty sure that that's what's happened, because it still hurts. And I'm still just kind of being, tender with it and trying to be careful. And I'm not going to go see a doctor. I'm not. Because if it is a cracked bone with like a little fracture, like I suspect that it is, there's nothing they can do about it. I can't get a cast for it. At best, they might put me in like a walking boot or something. Maybe they give me one of those little scooters that you got like the one knee up, which look kind of cool, but I never really see anyone like doing any tricks on those things or really going fast. It just kind of seems to be like, it's there. So that's kind of where that's at. It's not fun. It's not fun. I'm not going to lie. Let's see. I got a flat tire. Okay. So the same day that I cracked a bone, allegedly, maybe, presumably, cracked a bone in my foot, I got a flat tire on the rear right tire of my truck. And the problem is that this is the middle of September. We're not to winter conditions yet here. Not by any stretch of the imagination. I think tomorrow's temperature is supposed to be like 87, 88 degrees for the high. So we're not to winter and Christmas time yet. However, this is Utah, and there's no reason to think that 2 weeks from now we couldn't see snow. because that just kind of happens sometimes. So the back tires on my truck are fairly bald. I've had them for a long time. I've rotated them from the front to the back. The last time I did tires, I only did 2. So they're pretty bald. I caught some sort of a bolt or something in it. I could see the metal sticking out. So I knew I had to replace that. So I decided to replace all 4 of them this go round. And so I got new tires this week. And that was kind of a bit of a thing because I was also hobbling around because I just injured myself doing who knows what. So that was kind of crazy. I sat over at a tire shop for a few hours until eventually I realized this was going to take longer than I thought. And so then I got picked up and came back later in the day. Let's see what else. I finished the Umbrella Academy. I'm super excited to tell this to Matt. I know he is probably going to be shocked to come back to find out that I finished all of that already because I was going so slow through the first season. And I will admit, the first season for me was slow. But when maybe the last 2 episodes of the first season started kind of picking up for me, like it wasn't that it was like a slow burn all the way through, but just it felt like they started like really kind of stoking the fire of the plot up a little bit. And then the second season I just felt was really strong through and through. The plot was really good. I think the characters felt more developed, more interesting at least to me, and so I really kind of wanted to follow them and see what was going on more. So, finished the Umbrella Academy Season 2. There is no Season 3 yet. I'm looking forward to that. Hopefully that's going to come soon. And then tonight, I started watching the 1985 Rankin and Bass cartoon, Thundercats, with Charlie and Jackson. We only got to watch the first 2, and I gotta say, it was so much fun going back, because Jackson is 6 years old right now. When that show came out in 85, I was 6. I was at the exact same age he is, and Charlie's only a year older. And I'm listening, of course, like, the theme song is burned into my brain. Lots of, like, even, like, the little music when they just kind of fight around with the other mutants there, the little... I can't remember what their names are off the top of my head right now, but the frog and the monkey man and like the wolf guy is all kind of crazy. And then we got to the second episode where Mumra gets introduced, and they were a little scared by that, but not too crazy. That was a lot of fun. I really, really enjoyed watching that with the boys. So really, like, that's kind of been my week, but I do have a question for some of the Super Friends. Because of the movie club that we're going to have here on the back half of the episode with Matt. I've been contemplating getting some more comics. I haven't been reading comics a lot lately. For a good long stretch I was reading some Superman, I was reading some Fables, I was reading some Flash. I read Avengers vs. X-Men from a couple years back. But right now, I'm considering on the Comixology, which is kind of the comics wing of Amazon, doing a 30-day trial, and that gives you like the unlimited, and you can read basically any comic book that's there. And then I think after that, it's only like $6 a month. It's not that crazy. But I'm contemplating reading some X-Men. And as I was kind of looking, and you'll see why when we end up talking about the movie club, I really have kind of been in an X-Men mood lately, and I realized that I watched the X-Men cartoon, and I've seen the movies. Besides the Avengers vs. X-Men that I read a couple years back ago, like the newest one, I don't know that I read a lot of X-Men. I read a lot of Spider-Man and Hulk, and I read Superman and Batman type stuff. But I didn't read a lot of the X-Men. So I'm wondering, Super Friends, if any of you are out there, big comic book readers, if you have any suggestions of where I should start with the X-Men, I'm interested. I've looked up some stuff online. Some people start with Chris Claremont's run on the X-Men. Some people say go all the way back to the beginning with Stan Lee and Steve Ditko and get the whole kit and caboodle, or Lee and Kirby. Sorry, not Ditko. So I kind of don't know there. Some people say, show up when Wolverine shows up, which is kind of around, I think, the Chris Claremont era. So anyway, let me know. I'm kind of in this X-Men world right now. I've been watching a lot of X-Men movies. I went back and rewatched the 2 Deadpool movies just because I want to kind of be back in that mutant world again. So, if you got some suggestions on X-Men comics, let me know and I'll get there. All right, super friends. So I think it's time we get to Rebel Intelligence. So we're going to pull out those old Wolverine claws. We're going to snick our way through some Bothans, and we're going to get into Rebel Intelligence.
I always have to let you know, many Bothans died to bring us this information.
Rest in peace, you Bothans.
All right, Spencer, what do you have for me this week in Rebel Intelligence? Why, thank you, Spencer. Let's see. Let's start off with something not great, but really not a surprise. Wonder Woman 1984. This was shown off at the DC Fandom event, which was just a couple weeks ago, and it looks so good. Like, I can't stress this enough that I'm excited for Wonder Woman 1984. However, we found out at the DC Fandom event that it got pushed back to October 2nd. And we're like, okay, that doesn't really surprise anyone because of the whole COVID, the pandemic we're in the middle of. Going to a movie theater is not necessarily big news right now. It's not a big thing. So, I was a little shocked, though, to hear that it's been pushed back again, this time to December 25th. Yes, Christmas Day of 2020. Now, if you're keeping score at home, originally, this thing was supposed to be released December 19th of 2019. And then it got pushed back to June for a number of, reasons inside the industry. Then, of course, the pandemic hit, and so we kind of didn't know what was going to go on. It got shifted back, and then again, and now again. So, we're looking at Christmas of this year. And I gotta say, I understand that the movie's done, that it's going to be great. I have no doubt about that. But this is nothing more than a business decision. They know that this is a sequel to a massive blockbuster. Warner Brothers does not want to blow this opportunity. They want to make a lot of money on it, obviously. But I think they also want it to be a big blockbuster. They want it to have a lot of good press. They want it to be all the things they need to have in the DCEU. The DCEU has been struggling for a little while. We've talked about this. And this is kind of like their flagship right now. This is a tentpole in that big, huge stake that they're, putting in the ground, saying, this is an anchor. This is our spot. This is what's going to hold us up in times of trouble. Because it did before, and we're going to do it again. That's their bet. That's what they're planning. I have no doubt about that. But they don't want to sacrifice the box office. They don't want to sacrifice the buzz. If they just went to VOD, I don't think this would be all that good from a business standpoint. I think the movie is still going to be good, but from a business standpoint, I don't think it's going to be that good. I don't know if they're going to be able to make the kind of money that they need to make. Because, let's be honest, this movie was made for, probably couple $100 million. Let's say 250 million. I'm not exactly sure. I'm just throwing a number out. But a movie like that, you don't just then not, do any media for it. You don't do any marketing push for it. No, you'll probably end up then going and putting $150 into marketing. So what some of these big movies do is that in order for the studio to be profitable, right? Everyone says, oh, well, let's say it was made for 250. It made 260. It's like, hey, look, they made a little bit of money. It more than broke even. But it's like, yeah, they made 10 million, but they also spent an additional 150 million to market. So I fully believe that Warner Brothers is going to delay as long as they can in order to capture that box office. That's just a feeling I have, but I really think that that's where they're going with this. So, once again, Wonder Woman 1984 is pushed to December 25th, Christmas time. Let's see what else. Parks and Recreation, one of my favorite comedies of all time, is reuniting, and it'll actually happen on Thursday, the day the podcast releases. They're reuniting for a town hall fundraiser event. So what is going on is a good majority of the cast of the NBC sitcom Parks and Rec, Amy Poehler, Aubrey Plaza, Nick Offerman, Retta, Adam Scott, and Jim O'Hare, and then also the creator Michael Schur, they're going to gather together remotely for some sort of a Zoom call. And the idea is, in order to be a part of this event, you have to make a donation. They're actually raising money for the Democratic Party in the state of Wisconsin. Not that I'm going to get really political here, but Wisconsin is a big battleground state this time around. And so they're getting together, and that is where the money they're going to be donating to. This event, they're calling it a town hall, is going to benefit the Democratic Party of Wisconsin. This is actually really similar to just a couple days ago, the Princess Bride cast did a reunion, and they did a fundraiser event also for the Democratic Party in the state of Wisconsin. I don't think that this is necessarily a new thing that we've seen. I don't know, maybe we've seen casts reunite or whatever for some sort of a charity or whatnot, where they'll charge admission and then it goes towards a charity or it goes towards some sort of fund or something. But because this is an election year, we're seeing this actually playing out for political parties, which I can't remember, and maybe it has, and maybe just my blinders are kind of up for this a little bit, but I don't really remember seeing or hearing about anything like this, where something in pop culture, like a TV show, in this case a TV show and a movie, have reunited, but their reunion is kind of it's admittance only, but you have to make a donation, and that donation goes to a political party. Usually it's some sort of a charity. I don't know, Super Friends, if this is just me, if I can't remember this ever happening before, but it seems interesting because I just don't have any memory of something like this happening for a political issue. So I thought that was kind of interesting. I thought I'd bring that up. If you are a Parks and Rec fan and you want to see it happen and you want to be a part of that, that is available. You can still go and do that. I'm assuming there's a website somewhere, wisdems.org/Parks and Rec, so you can go see what the Parks and Rec people are up to and what kind of hilarity or whatever they're going to do there. And then the Princess Bride one has already happened, and so we've kind of missed that one. But this kind of, interesting crossover between politics and pop culture. So, let's see. What else? Oh, speaking of box office, kind of talking about the whole Wonder Woman thing, we know that Tenet, the movie that is done by Christopher Nolan that was, looked at as being this like next big, Christopher Nolan kind of like blockbuster type of movie. It's released, it's in the theaters, but interestingly enough, Warner Brothers has decided that they are not reporting the day-to-day box office profits. And apparently it's not making a lot of the other studios happy. So, obviously we know this is the middle of a pandemic. This is an unprecedented time. But what they're doing is they're like releasing certain blocks of data where they may say something like, opening weekend it did this. Or it did this in its second week. But not breaking down the day-to-day. They're being very kind of defensive and kind of cagey about what they're releasing, what they're not releasing. There's a third-party research company called Rentrack that apparently does a lot of this information. Gathers it. They're owned by a company called ComScore. This is all kind of like inside industry stuff. You may care about it, you may not. But apparently, these companies have been asked by Warner Brothers to kind of keep it secretive, and they're not releasing data, and they're declining to comment on some of the stuff and how it's going on. Apparently, Warner Brothers did say that it generated about $9 million during its first weekend, and only about $6.7 million during the second weekend in theaters. And so obviously it's a drop-off, which I don't think isn't really a surprise to anyone that goes and sees movies. But this is interesting because it's supposed to be this big, big, big movie. And I know Christopher Nolan said he didn't want this to go just to video on demand. That he wanted it to be in the theaters, and he wanted to have the theater experience. But if this is supposed to be a big blockbuster movie, and it only made $9 million its opening weekend, then obviously people still are not going to the movie theaters. The human side of us still is concerned about what's going on with that. We're not returning to normal life entirely. And so trying to say no, this is going to have to be a movie experience you catch in the theaters, it's going to hurt Warner Brothers. They're not going to make the money they want on this. And I think that's why they're kind of being cagey with how they're reporting this. Now, if I were a movie executive, if I was, I don't know, Disney, right? I would be looking at this going, okay, Warner Brothers isn't releasing this. I would be using this as a cautionary tale saying, look, we're only getting a little bit of information, and it doesn't look good, and it doesn't look like ticket sales are anywhere near where we would want them to be for one of our big tentpole movies, and that would help me make an informed decision as to what I plan to do. And if it were me, I wouldn't be releasing movies in theaters right now. I'd say, nope. I would do the video on demand that's been done with Scooby-Doo and Trolls World Tour and even the Mulan movie. I would be doing that for some titles. Maybe not all. Some of them I'd push. I'd say, okay, we've got it in the can. It's ready to go. Let's push. But Christopher Nolan was really insistent on this had to be in the theaters. It's in theaters now. I'm not going to recommend going and seeing it in the theaters just because of the pandemic. But I'll tell you what, if this thing comes to VOD, I'm going to get it. I've heard nothing but good reviews from those people that have seen it. I'm just not going to go. But it is interesting that we're not going to be getting full details, and it's just, we're not there yet, Super Friends. We're just not there yet. All right, the last thing I have in Rebel Intelligence. If you are a fan of the Frank Herbert book Dune, Super Friends, go watch that trailer that just dropped last week. Oh my goodness. I never watched the original Dune movie like when it first came out. I got scared of it. My dad was watching it and he yelled at me when I came out because I think the sandworm was on the screen and I was fairly young. He didn't want me being, scared. Instead, he scared me. And so I got scared of scary movies because of him. It's a weird thing. I get it. But my dad loved that book. He loved that book. And I remember listening to him tell me over and over and over again about how an amazing book Dune was and how I needed to read it. Sadly, I didn't end up reading it till after he'd passed, and it had been a number of years, and I read that book and I went, wow, this is an amazing book. And I wish I could have gone back, and I wish I could have had a conversation with my father about it. I have seen the original Dune movie, and I wish that my dad had lived long enough to see this trailer for this new adaptation of Dune, because it looks amazing. I'm not going to go into a ton of it, but I just want to say that if you haven't read this book, now's the time. This movie is scheduled to be released, I think, like December 8th. That's, in my opinion, that's probably going to get pushed. It's also going to be dropping like 2 weeks before Wonder Woman 1984. So even if theater-going experiences are somewhat back to normal, the movie may get moved because it's not going to want to have to compete with Wonder Woman. It's going to want some time to itself. This thing looks good. I can see all sorts of like little bits and pieces from the book that I go, oh, this is this, and that is this, and da-da-da. I would highly recommend everyone going and watching this. If you like science fiction, go read Dune by Frank Herbert. Just pick up the first book. I understand that there's a lot of other books that kind of continue on in that world, but go pick up this one. I don't think it's a long read. I think you could probably get through it fairly reasonably. Depending on how you read, you may be able to consume it in a weekend, or it may take you a few weeks. If you read a bunch, go grab the audiobook. Seriously, whatever, go grab it though, and then go back and watch this trailer. It's got a lot of things that I went, oh, hey, look, I know exactly where that is in the book. Or, ooh, I remember that part from the book. This is this, and that's this character, and, oh, that's Gurney Halleck, which is Josh Brolin. I was like, oh, sweet. And, here's, Isaac Oscar, or Oscar Isaac, who's playing Duke Leto Atreides. And here's, Jason Momoa, who's playing Duncan Idaho. I'm like, okay, sweet. Javier Bardem is in here and he's playing Stilgar. And I'm like, ooh, I recognize this and I know this character. And like, it was just one of those moments where, how to put this? I feel like there was a moment before the Lord of the Rings movies hit that I was just super excited about, because I knew here's a book that's loved by fantasy fans, and we knew that was going to get translated in a way that was going to bring in so many more people into that world. I have that same similar feeling with this version of Dune. Like, I've loved the book and then some of the other books that follow, but I love that book Dune so much. And to know that we're on the bubble of getting a really, really, really good Dune movie that's going to be, from what it looks like, fairly true to the source material and gonna have the capabilities to make it look the way it should look. I mean, the one from the early 80s, I've seen it. I mean, they do try to keep to the story, but I mean, it doesn't look good. It's not, it was made, it's a thing, but we have the technology now to do it right. Anyway, Super Friends, if you haven't read Dune, go read that. I really think you will enjoy it, and I think that when this movie comes out, you're going to have a greater appreciation for this movie, and you're going to feel like you were on the inside when the movie comes out, and it's going to mean more to you. Anyway, definitely worth seeing. I loved it. I think I've probably gushed on way too long about the Dune trailer, but it was there. Okay, that's all I have for Rebel Intelligence. We are going to move on to our question of the week. Last week we talked about the Mario 3D All-Stars, the game coming out for Nintendo Switch. That'll actually arrive, I believe, this Friday, so the day after the podcast releases. And we were having a conversation, and we talked about our favorite Mario game, our favorite Mario adjacent game, and then our first Mario memory. And we asked you, Super Friends, those same questions, and we got a lot of answers, so we're going to get to them right now. We're going to start off like we always do, over at the email, Fortress of Nerditude, which is fortofnerd@gmail.com. And we have Peter Christensen. He says, Dear Nerds, Matt, I think you'll be fine waiting for Mulan to come to the peasant tier of Disney+. We bought Premier Access, and it was fine. Maybe the best of the modern remakes. Its biggest problem, it is just not as fun or moving as the original cartoon. A movie about a girl, by any other name, defending her family and country would be great, but this one just didn't stack up. The martial arts were pretty cool, and I would like to hear someone more versed in martial arts movies discuss it. We've paid more to see worse movies in a theater, but I think overall, Disney Plus failed to make the case that premium movies should cost $30. I have no idea how Nielsen is measuring streaming ratings unless they have partnerships with the streaming services. Netflix knows how many seconds each show is being watched, at what point people give up on the show, not which episode, they know which scene, and the distribution curve of viewership for a show, both past and projected. Their grasp of data is detailed at a layer that would be hard to comprehend, and it's hard to imagine Amazon is much farther behind them. It's not hard to imagine that Apple is far behind in this, which, of course, they're new, so that would make sense. I've enjoyed seeing Cobra Kai get a second life now that it's on Netflix. It goes to show how hard it is for the big media companies to break out of their primary function. There are 100 new shows a month produced by streaming companies, and one of the best ones ever came from YouTube. And YouTube has 1 billion active users, but not enough of them respected YouTube as a professional content creator. But now that it's on Netflix, it's part of pop culture again. Not to step on Rebel Intelligence, but the teaser released this week said that Season 3 won't be released until 2021. And that is true, and Peter, I left this to you because I read it a little ahead of time, and I figured I'll let you break the news this week. Spencer, I checked my email, and the first time I emailed was on December 22nd, 2016 for Rogue One. I didn't write down the episode number, and your feed doesn't go back that far. That is episode number 4, Peter. The movie club on Rogue One was episode number 4. It was the first movie club we'd ever done. It was us trying to wet our beak in that world and figuring out how we wanted to do movie clubs. And I remember that one very, very, very vividly. All right. Follow up to last week's discussion of the recasting King T'Challa. There's a big difference between recasting Rhodey in 2010 or recasting Bruce Banner for the third time. I'm not well versed in comics history, so I'm sure there's some great T'Challa stories that won't get told. But every story has 1,000 times more stories from comics that will never get told in movies, just because of the relative cost and quantity of movies versus comics. That makes sense. That is true. That is a good point. There's always going to be a lot more stories of Black Panther, Spider-Man, Wolverine, whatever, because they're writing a monthly comic book for years and years and years and years and years. That makes sense. My experience with Mario mostly ends with the Super Nintendo, so I don't have the same history to draw on. My best Mario, Super Mario World for SNES. This and Legend of Zelda: Link to the Past are my favorite console games ever. Super Mario Bros. 3 is the most impressed I've ever been by a Mario game. It didn't seem possible that the NES could play a game like that. Mario kind of took a back seat in my classic NES experience because my cousins had a lot more games like Castlevania, Metroid, Battletoads, Contra, etc. The Mario game I played the most was Super Mario Land for the Game Boy because I actually had a Game Boy. But no one remembers or cares about that game. Bonus Mario. Someone recently published a video explaining the world record speedrun of Super Mario Bros. 3 in 3 minutes and 4 seconds. He reconstructs frame by frame a technique that uses slipping to enter a pipe in the wrong direction, and exact positioning of enemies creates different assembly language commands that eventually lead to exiting the pipe into the end screen where he rescues the princess. It's the kind of video I love, where I can't follow the depth of the information, but it's explained so well that it's fun nonetheless. If you appreciate video games and nerdery, it's worth taking 15 minutes to watch it, even if you don't understand the programming. Cheers, Peter Christensen. Peter, I actually did watch that video. After you sent me the link, I took a look at it, and I was like, okay, I want to take a look at this and see what it is. It actually was very, very fascinating to me to see how they broke down the idea of, like, if you do this at this moment and you do this at this moment, it changes certain variables, which then reports to a certain code. And then it goes back to call back on its next action, and that next action actually isn't there. So what it does is it then tries to default to a different action. And it just kind of went through like the stack of, like, here's the next command, here's this, because, I've played video games for so long that I kind of sometimes just forget, like, it's really just a whole bunch of code that when you do this action, this response happens. You trigger this event, which then does this next line of code. And then this code triggers this next line of code, and so on and so forth. And then your next action, and boom, 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 boom. It was a really, really cool video, Peter. Thank you very much for sending it over. I will definitely recommend the Super Friends go watch it. It was a lot of fun. Okay, going over to Twitter at Fort of Nerd, we've got Will's Toy Clearance at Will's Toy Clear. He says, Super Mario Land 2, the 6 golden coins. My first 100% and probably my earliest memory, sat on the stairs in the right light to see the OG Game Boy. And that is so true, because on that thing, like, you had to the light had to be hitting that thing just right, because if it wasn't, you couldn't see a dang thing. This was before all the backlit screens and all the fancy OLED, that we've got nowadays. I'd never played that game myself, Will, but I feel your pain, though, of trying to sit in the right position. Ryan Kubacki at RMK Buried Alive says, Maine. Tie between Sunshine and Odyssey. Both were fun and have amazing replay value. And I'm not going to argue there. I love Super Mario Sunshine. I'm super, super, super excited that it's going to be on this 3D Mario All-Stars. And then Odyssey was great. For adjacent games, I struggle picking between the Paper Mario and the Mario and Luigi franchises. Both had some truly classic games. Thousand Year Door and Bowser's Inside Story were A+ material. Tim Paulin at TPaulin20 says Super Mario World SNES. And Nathan Van Diggle agrees. He also says Super Mario World SNES. That was a good one. Not gonna lie. That was a good one. Mike BC at Minister Mike BC says, favorite Mario game? Super Mario 2 for the NES. Now, I know that is not going to be on most people's list as their favorite. I know it was different than the others, but I'm not going to lie. That one has a place in my heart, and I love it. Love it, love it, love it, love it, love it. First Mario memory. We had an NES when I was little, and I loved playing Super Mario Brothers, even though back then I was garbage at it. Favorite Mario adjacent? Mario Kart. 8 Deluxe and Double Dash are the best. And I think that's right. That's, Double Dash and 8 Deluxe. Just so good. The Mario Kart games are just, amazing. El Maiko at Giz Pika. if we're being honest, Mario platform games are kind of boring. But best Mario game is Smash, and my favorite is Melee. Hashtag GameCube Master Race. But Ultimate is definitely the best one. And Matt, how much I got to Venmo you for one of those Baby Yoda handbands at Disney World? The problem is, Mike, El Myco at Gizpika, Gizpika. I don't know, man. I'll have to see if I can text Matt and ask him about that for you. 846, I can't breathe. At DSpin67 says, Mario game, favorite? I don't have one. Now, I don't know if that's just your way of saying that you can't choose because you love them all, or you just don't like Mario. I don't know. You're gonna have to let me know, because I'm just looking at this. I don't know. That could go either way. That could be a coin flip. Lucy at BBQ Smarties says, Super Mario 64. First time I played it, I was hooked. The DS version also had 30 extra stars to collect. Makes a good challenge. I do like that. We don't have anything over on Discord. We don't have anything over on Instagram, but we do have a voicemail, and we're going to give that a listen right now.
What's up, Fortress of Nerditude? This is Paul Calico coming at you with the question of the week. Favorite Mario games? So, hands down, my favorite Mario game has got to be Super Mario World. I can pick that game up and play it all the way through any and every time you play it. It's just a classic. It looks good. It still plays good. It's all around the best game, I think. For my adjacent Mario game, I'm going to have to say, go basic with it, Mario Kart. It's fun to get 3 or 4 people together, maybe even 8 now that we got the Switch, and just go at each other, try to win the race, it's super fun. And then my all-time favorite Mario memory is the very first time I saw Mario 64. And his pudgy little face came on the screen and he goes, "It's me, a Mario." Oh man, I have sat and played that game for hours that night. It was just so much fun actually being in a 3D world for the first time. And it was just so new. It was so good. Like, crazy. You go walking around the castle and jumping into the paintings to do the levels. Such a great idea, and I wish they would implement that plan in a new game, Make a Super Mario 64 2. Anyway, guys, thanks for letting me chat. Else time.
Thank you, Paul Calicote. I appreciate the voicemail. I do like the whole jumping through the picture thing. It was a lot of fun. And it was kind of cool. You got to do a little bit of that in Odyssey as well, every now and again. Super Friends, thank you so much for your answers to the question of the week. We appreciate your input each and every week. And once again, we are looking forward to your input this upcoming week for episode 200. We think it's going to be great. What you can do for us this week is you can tell your friends, your family, your loved ones, your neighbors, the people you stand in line next to socially distanced at the grocery store. Tell them about the podcast. Let them, get their device out, help them find how they can find us and listen to us each and every week. And then also, please submit your questions, get them in on time, or show up live and get those questions to us, because we really want to make you, the Super Friends, a big part of our episode 200 celebration, because you are the lifeblood of the podcast, and we wouldn't be here without you. Okay, so now for the second half of the podcast, we are going to do a movie club. It's on X-Men Days of Future Past. Matt will be joining me, so I'm going to drop this in here, and you can hear our discussion that we had just a few days ago about that movie and our thoughts on it as we go back. So I hope you enjoy that. All right, Matt. So we decided for this week we were going to do a little time traveling and go back for our movie club.
Yeah, man.
and we're going to watch X-Men Days of Future Past, the film from 2014.
About time travel.
About time travel, I know.
Look at that.
This was a movie you picked, so I'm going to ask you, why this movie?
Okay. So we were really wanting to pick a really great movie that really fits in with the vein of the podcast. And I was looking over kind of movies that made sense that maybe recently got released, and we just couldn't find anything because of the COVID stuff. And so I went with, okay, what's recently been available to stream? And the X-Men series has started to pour into Disney Plus now.
Right. Not all of them, but most of them.
Yeah. So we're getting them slowly but surely. I think on September 4th, like Wolverine or The Wolverine,
yes,
was added. And so there's a bunch of these X-Men movies that have been added recently over the last weeks and months. So I went with, in my opinion, what is the best X-Men movie, and thought Days of Future Past. That's what I want to do, because it was not only a really great movie, as I recall. Right now, remember, I haven't seen this movie in probably 5 to 7 years. And it was a turning point for the franchise as well. So I wanted to kind of pick a movie where it was almost an origin, but it kind of blended things. It was, it seems like a really solid pick. In talking about X-Men, because I'm hoping that we see some X-Men in the Marvel Cinematic Universe as we're growing toward it. So this kind of made sense because we're really into the Marvel stuff. So this made sense to me.
I like that you picked an X-Men movie, because the last X-Men movie I saw was Logan, which was, I think, in like 2017, maybe? Somewhere around there, 2017. I don't think it was 2018. I think it was 2017. Anyway, I mean, I could look it up and, tell you, but what's the fun of that, Super Friends? I got to give you something to correct me on. But I love that because X-Men is amazing Marvel property. The first movie in the X-Men series was in the year 2000. It's been 20 years. Yeah, the first X-Men movie was in the year 2000. And so it's been 20 years, and New Mutants was the last movie in the Fox X-Men, series, which we kind of talked about that a little bit, that I didn't want to see it. You kind of did, because they wanted it to be kind of a horror movie.
I don't want to see it anymore, just to want to clear the record, because it looks terrible.
It does. It looks terrible, because it's about mutants that are kind of in a hospital, and they don't really go out and do anything, and they're not X-Men, they're just kind of like mutants. But what I do like is that you picked also one of the X-Men movies that I consider to be one of the best in this series. Yeah. And it has both the old cast and the new cast that I kind of call the first class cast, or maybe they called them like the X-Men, beginnings, or I don't know, whatever you want to call it.
Right.
And with time travel, they blend this, and I just love this film. So I'm glad you picked it. I told Brita about this, and she said, "Oh, let me know when you're going to watch it. I'll watch that again with you."
Yeah.
And so we watched that, and then I'm not going to lie, we then went on and watched X-Men Apocalypse right after it, and watched the movie that follows it immediately after.
Nice.
So we were just in a real X-Men type of mood. And Matt, I gotta say, before we really dig into this movie, I'm looking forward somewhere down the road, because now I'm kind of back in this whole like X-Men headspace. I started looking at X-Men comic books on Comixology again, because it's like, okay, do I do the subscription and just read through a bunch of stuff, or do I just purchase a couple of the more well-known runs and just say like, I'm going to buy one of the omnibus books for like $15 and then get like, 12 or 14 episodes that, really covers a good time period. But the X-Men it's amazing. I love this world, and knowing that now Marvel has the rights back to them, Disney is going to be able to do X-Men movie. I want to have a conversation at some point. We'll sit down and we'll talk about how we think, how we think the X-Men are going to enter into the Marvel world. And we'll get to that a little bit because I'll touch upon a few things about that because of a character in this movie that also happens to be in Age of Ultron and how we think that. So anyway, that's a future podcast. That's a future discussion. But right now we're doing a movie club, X-Men Days of Future Past. So the film's 2014, directed and produced by Bryan Singer and written by Simon Kinberg, from a story based on something Simon Kinberg written with Jane Goldman and Matthew Vaughn. Matthew Vaughn did a lot of I think X-Men First Class. Yeah. And this story is taken directly from the comics, basically. This is one of these things where the beauty of the X-Men, the beauty of the beauty of a lot of the Marvel properties is that they don't just take these great characters and say, hey, we got these characters, let's write a new story. Yeah. They say, let's go find an amazing story that's already been told, and then we will, we'll clean it up and make it more ready for a film. And that's what they did here with this, because the Days of Future Past was a story that was published in Uncanny X-Men 141 and 142 in 1981. So the story's been around for a little bit. So Matt, why don't you help remind the Super Friends, what is the plot of X-Men Days of Future Past? Yeah, so just at the opening scene, first of all, it almost felt like a Star Wars movie. Kind of. With the flying, I don't know, call them carrier crafts of these Sentinels that plop out. And it was like, oh man, this is like some type of Imperial shuttle that's carrying, troopers. It felt and I say that in the best possible way because the cinematography and the CG was so good. I didn't feel like I was watching a movie that was about a decade old. It felt really current. It was awesome. Yeah. I just want to get that out of the way. The long story short, it looks amazing. You've got a series of mutants that are being attacked by these Sentinels, and these Sentinels are these powerful metal beings that can fly and kill and spear, and they seem to be indestructible. Yeah. And they are able to, as the scene continues on and the mutants are trying to fight them, they're able to take away the powers and adapt to the powers that the mutants are using on them. Yep. So if Iceman's using his power, fire, right? He's able to extinguish himself. He's able to adapt to what's happening. And that's like, okay, how do I beat Sentinels that can do that? And then you've got the most important part of this is you've got a character played by Ellen Page, who is Kitty Pryde, right? Who takes one of the characters back, one of the mutants. I can't remember what his name is. Warpath. Thank you. They go back into a back room, and it seems like everyone's protecting them, and she is doing something with his mind. You don't really know or understand exactly what it is yet. And right as the Sentinels have defeated all of the mutants, and they're about to break in, they just disappear. Yep. And then come to find out, she's sending him back in time to be able to warn the mutants that the Sentinels are going to find them and they need to move. Right. And this has happened several times. They keep having to go back to warn themselves and to move so that the Sentinels do not destroy them. So that's kind of been their method of survival, is warning themselves by going back in time. So it's very, very interesting setup and premise immediately. And they're avoiding an inevitable destruction over and over again until they can find a way to beat it, and they cannot. And what's interesting is this isn't time travel in the sense of Kitty Pryde uses power to physically transport Warpath back. Yeah, he's there the whole time, sleeping. Yeah, but his consciousness goes back into his younger self 3 days in the past. Yeah. And he's able to convince himself and realize, and so then they move and they're not there 3 days later, and so they're fine. Uh-huh. I love that because it's time travel, but it's time travel because you're shifting someone's consciousness through time. Yeah. That is crazy to me. I love it. from the moment I remember being in the theater and seeing this, I went, ooh, time travel, mental teleportation. Like I was just all, you know me on time travel. I'm all in.
Yeah.
I'm just all in.
I'm with you. I was excited. And I hadn't seen this movie in such a long time. I knew that obviously it had to go back with going back in time.
Yeah.
But this was it was a lot cooler and more visually stunning and more intense than I remember it being, with the stakes being a little higher than I recall.
Yeah. So now we've got
important.
the method of how a small set of Kitty Pryde, Colossus, Blink, Warpath, Bishop, Iceman, and Sunspot are evading the Sentinels in the present.
Right.
But how does that come into play with the rest of the story?
Yeah, so they are able to get a call out to, we'll call them the main guys.
Right.
We've got Professor X and Wolverine and Magneto and Storm.
Yeah.
And they come to their aid, and then they explain the situation. And they realize, well, the reason that these Sentinels are so powerful and indestructible is because they have taken, scientifically, they have taken on the power and the DNA of Mystique. And we know that Mystique, played by Jennifer Lawrence, is the character who can turn into anything and anyone and emulate whatever she wants.
Right.
So at the drop of a hat, she can become someone or something that she's not, which is a super cool power. And I'd say I wish I had that, but I don't know what I would do with it.
Ooh.
Pretend I'm the president? I don't know.
I mean, I don't know.
You'd be able to tell if I became the president as he currently sits.
Let's not go there.
But anyway, we don't get political here. Anyway, but so they have to go, basically they figure out, okay, we need to go back, way back, to when Raven is Mystique's name, is scorned by the mutants. She finds out the plan. Oh, sorry about that. She finds out the plan of the government, which is to exterminate these mutants because they're too scary and they're too dangerous. Right. And she wants to basically assassinate the man in charge, who is Bolivar Trask.
Right, yep.
And that series of events, that chain of events, and her anger and desire for revenge is what allows them to get her power, her DNA, and set this chain of events that will end up killing all mutants.
Yeah. I think, for me, the time travel idea is amazing. I think the idea of, like, let's go back in time and basically put an end, kill the man in charge. But you realize that, like, killing Bolivar Trask actually isn't going to stop it. It'll only exacerbate the problem.
Right.
Make the military and the president at the time more focused and determined than ever to go after mutants and to take care of mutants, right?
Right. Yep.
So what I like is that they have to figure out a way to, like, try to convince her not to kill Bolivar Trask. Like, that's the X-Men's goal, is to try to change her behavior and help her see the better way, the higher way. And they have to use Wolverine. They have to use Logan, because his healing ability is going to allow them to be able to do this process, which sending him back in time 50 years, because the year's 2023. He has to go back to 1973.
Right.
Sending him back 50 years, that, like, they've never done something that big. And so Professor X is going to have to work with Kitty Pryde to make that happen, right? I love this because there's some great things going on story-wise. In the present, in 2023, Magneto and Professor X, are working together.
Yeah.
Back in 1973, though, they're on complete opposite sides, because they've been on complete opposite sides for decades.
Yeah.
Absolute decades. And so Wolverine's going to have to go back and convince them to work together to try to stop this, because Professor Xavier isn't in a good place, and Magneto is being held in prison, but they understand that they need both of them to work together to make this happen. But there's two different motivating factors, right? Professor Xavier wants to help the future because he wants to help Raven. He wants to look out for the best of humanity. Whereas Magneto's motivation is he wants to see mutants rise up to what he believes to be their proper place over humans.
Right.
And Wolverine has to deal with all of that all over again, because he's done this before.
Jeez. Yeah.
50 years in the past.
Yeah. Yeah, it makes for an interesting, beginning of the movie.
Yeah.
Because you think, because it's not that far in that you go back and you have to rescue Magneto from a high security prison. That happens really fast.
Right. In the middle of the Pentagon, a bazillion stories below the surface of the earth.
Right. And of course, that's not an issue when you're a mutant. You've got Quicksilver on your side.
Right.
And they go and convince this goofy, teenage kid who doesn't give a rat's A about anything. They had to convince him to join the squad to make this possible. And there's a lot. There's more to it than this is an action movie. There's some heart and emotion to it that you feel the young Dr. Xavier's pain or Professor Xavier's pain. And it goes beyond just I don't know. He's self-medicating. Right. He's trying to dilute his power and his pain of both losing Raven and also his at this time inability to deal with all the voices that he's hearing. His inability to truly capture his power, and he just wants to. He'd rather be on drugs so that he can walk than understand his ability and harness that power. And losing Raven is really what sends him down this path of darkness, where you're kind of dealing with you could kind of say you're dealing with a drug addict
who's who's addicted to the drug that helps him walk and dulls his pain, but he's also super depressed because he was the guy that had this grand noble idea of I will bring other mutants and I will help them find their way and make them better. And then when he finally gets a team together and they go to stop the Cuban Missile Crisis, they cause a whole bunch of problems. And some of the people he's recruited, notably Magneto, Eric Lenscher, his best friend, basically betrays him and realize that they're two sides of the same coin, but they're very different sides. And so he's just a broken man in 1973.
Yeah, so it's interesting to see. And here in this portion, Wolverine's back, and he's the only one that will ever remember any of these events taking place, which is kind of sad too, because they tell him that when you go back and if you're successful, you are the only person who will remember the events of the last 50 years as they happened. And that means you will only remember something that never happened. And B, you won't have any recollection or understanding of what actually did happen in this timeline that you're going back to, which is 50 years. That's sad.
I want to talk about this because this is actually one of I know this is a sub kind of plot of the movie, a very small subplot, but it's my absolute favorite. Okay. Because Wolverine he's the protagonist of these X-Men series of films. He really is. He's gone through so much trauma to get to where he is by the time that he's willing to go back and to do this, knowing that he's lost loved ones, he's seen friends die, he's been tortured. He was Weapon X, all these things that happened to him. And that he's willing to go back and he's going to remember all of that pain yet that's now not going to happen. So for him, it's going to be like this, like phantom pain that's still going to be there and still going to torture his psyche in a way.
Right.
But it never really happened. Only in his mind. Like I love that because it just makes his character much more complex in a really interesting narrative way.
Agreed. And they pay close attention to the details of that, where he mentions he meets the person who's going to torture him eventually.
Yep.
And then you realize when he first gets pissed, it's like the claws, quite literally, that come out, not the things
bone.
we're used to seeing.
Yep.
Which is, that metal structure come out where he's like ready to rip things apart.
Yeah.
So
it's not his adamantium claws, it's the bone claws.
No.
Because that doesn't happen until the very early 80s up in Canada in Alkali Lake. And that hasn't happened yet back in the 70s. Which is awesome.
I just love the attention to detail. This movie is really, really good at that. Really, really good at those of us that are paying attention and giving us hints, too, to saying, oh, this is before those events.
Yeah.
For those that were looking for it. So anyway, if you're moving past that, the movie continues on. They get Magneto because Quicksilver is awesome, and he takes out all these people by having these fun little vignettes, so to speak, or these musical moments where pretty much time stops and he moves it and he can do anything he wants. So breaking Magneto out was no issue whatsoever for the team. And we eventually get to a point once this team is convinced that Wolverine has come from the future.
Right.
They believe
which takes
him.
A little bit. Yeah.
There's enough evidence that he can tell them and to show them that Professor X decides, okay, in a relatively powerful moment when he's about to shoot up, that he lets it go and asks Beast, basically, I hate to do this, but give me that wheelchair because I'm not going to be able to walk. Anyway, I like that moment. Understanding that what we're fighting against is more important than your kind of personal desires, and then him hitting that turning point of becoming, the true Professor X that we know from Patrick Stewart's version. And I don't know. I always get excited when he goes into that room and he puts on that headset.
Cerebro.
And there's that map, and you're like, oh, fetch. He gets... Anyway, long story short, he's unsuccessful at first, and then he gets around and he feels for it, and he's able to communicate with people around the world and locate, and, such a cool power. Anyway.
Yeah. What I always thought was interesting, too, about this movie is that they have this unveiling ceremony to show the Sentinels that Bolivar Trask has built to track and eliminate mutants, which, of course, Magneto has hijacked.
Right.
And, he gets them to do this. But what I thought was really cool is that they paid close attention because they made them look not like the futuristic versions after Mystique's technology and a bunch of others have been adapted, but they made them look like how they looked in the comics, also how they looked in the 1992 animated series, that they were very metallic and robot looking, and how someone would try to build a robot maybe in the early 70s that had some sort of AI. It doesn't look like it's some fabricated slick airplane with all smooth sides. It looks a little chunky. It looks a little clunky.
It does. Yeah, it definitely looks like a prototype of sorts.
Yeah, but that kind of helps lend to the authenticity, which I think is just a great little nod and paying close attention. But of course, we get this moment where they finally convince Mystique not to kill Bolivar Trask in front of cameras, in front of everyone, in front of the president, with, all of these Sentinels watching, but they convince her to let him live and show the world that mutants, you don't need to fear mutants.
Right.
That, not all mutants are looking to come and kill all humans and do this, which is great because we have this back and forth kind of struggle in these X-Men movies. The underlying tension is always that humans are scared of mutants and scared of their abilities and scared of their powers. And so humans are doing absolutely horrible things to mutants in the name of protecting human society, where the mutants just want to exist and live for the most part. And then unfortunately, there are those like Magneto, like Mystique for most of the series, that, you know, the Brotherhood of Mutants, those type, that they want to revenge themselves upon the humans because they're tired of being pushed around. It's kind of the Martin Luther King versus Malcolm X approach, you know,
Right.
And it's, there's a politicalness to that. There's a politicalness to the story, but it's not heavy. It's more of just, you know, we should find a way that, you know, society can exist together. But unfortunately, there's like this just bumping together where there's all this friction. And I love the fact that they're addressing this again, because this is addressed in some of the other movies that had taken place earlier. But it was nice to see, like, oh, this existed in 1973.
Right.
This was still an issue.
Yes, agree. The story is a cool one to be told, though, like you have mentioned before, it is a common story for X-Men.
Yeah.
But this is told in a way, it's just different. I don't know what it is about this movie. It's just different. It feels fresher. It feels more consequential. Maybe it's just because we know what could happen in the future, and that's why we went back. And so that whole, you know, and we see a lot of struggle from a lot of the mutants. We see Wolverine get incapacitated. He's unable to help anymore. He was sent back to help, and he's strewn up by rebar and thrown down in the bottom of a river.
Yep.
And can't do anything. And so it's up to the current X-Men with the knowledge that they have, mostly Professor X, who's able to sit there and to use his powers to try to communicate with Raven and help her understand, you know, the complexity of the situation, and that her decision influences eternity, so to speak.
Right.
Like your decision right now, like it's in your hands.
So I want to go to the very end of the film, plot-wise, and then we're going to talk about casting and some music and some of the other stuff. Once that moment is made, and the decision's made, and they don't kill Bolivar Trask, and they show the world that they don't need to be as fearful, and she saves President Nixon and whatnot, right?
Yeah.
That we jump back 50 years into the future, and Logan, Wolverine, wakes up in the mansion, and he starts walking around, and he sees, you know, Colossus and Kitty Pryde and Beast, which is, you know, the adult version, which is Kelsey Grammer, and he sees Scott Summers and Jean Grey.
Yeah.
And I was like, oh, and then he sees Rogue, and then he and, you know, people are calling him Professor, and he's like, wait, what? And then he goes in and he sees Professor X, and he starts talking to him, and he says, I'm not sure what happened. He's like, this isn't right. I'm just here. And then it clicks to Professor X, and he's like, welcome back, old friend. Because the cool thing about this is, right, Logan remembers the other history.
Yep.
And like we said, that he's not going to remember now the last 50 years because his timeline's changed. So when he wakes up, his memory is going to be different. But the interesting thing is, because he went back in time to 73 and told Professor Xavier all the things that were happening and all the things that were going on, Xavier has waited and been around. It's like, we don't know this part because the timeline could have shifted, so we don't exactly know when Logan finds his way to the mansion at this point. Because obviously we see Jean Grey alive and Scott Summers alive and Rogue, like these characters are all gone in his time, his timeline. They're all back now, but it's that moment when Professor Xavier realizes, I haven't talked to this version of Wolverine in 50 years. Yeah. Even though I've been with him for I don't know how long, he's now regained all his memory, and that's, just kind of clicking into place. And so that hello, old friend for me, that for me, that's such a satisfying moment. I'm like, because in the original films, Professor Xavier had to be like a mentor, a guide to Wolverine to help him unlock his potential and help him break free of some of his trauma to become a better person. But then in this film, Wolverine has to go back and be that for Professor Xavier. And so like it really kind of makes their relationship very cyclical and kind of closes that loop and closes that circle in a very satisfying, narratively sane, satisfying type of way.
That moment was cool, for sure. It's cool. It's cool to see people alive that were definitely not.
Yes.
And you only know that if you've seen the previous films and you understand kind of what happened. And my favorite person to see back was Beast. I love that guy.
Yeah.
And it's cool when he asks him, he says, do I make it? And Wolverine says, no.
Right.
And he's like, but we can change that. And then I just love that he goes out there. He's like, well, I'm going to do it anyway. I'm not going to try and save myself knowing that if I do this, I might die. He goes out there and he sacrifices anyway. I just thought that was cool. It was good to see him alive.
Yeah. So like one last thing about like the whole time travel thing, whatever, right? Is that what I loved about this is that it really, anyway, we'll talk about the Marvel stuff later, but it really is a soft reset because now after the events of X-Men Days of Future Past, all the previous movies, X-Men, X-Men 2, X-Men The Last Stand, all the Wolverine movies that have come out, all those movies now are technically gone. Those events didn't happen. Right. And so like from this point on in 2023, they could tell other stories. They could do other things with these characters. Now, of course, they ended up doing another movie, Apocalypse, and then Dark Phoenix with some of this younger cast. And we're going to talk about the casting here. But I'm hoping that there's some way that storyline of X-Men Days of Future Past somehow can come into play in the Marvel universe as a jumping off point, because that would give them a great place to recast and to start telling stories again that have maybe even been told in some of these movies, because those didn't really now happen in the timeline. I think, anyway, there's a whole different conversation, but let's talk about the cast. Wolverine by Hugh Jackman obviously is...
It's perfect.
I mean, it's perfect. Great. We've seen him in how many films now? He's great. The one thing I will say about his performance in this is that he's less gruff. Way less. He's less of the Wolverine and the Wild Man, because he has to be that mentor and guide and go back, which I thought was an interesting choice and a change. We have James McAvoy as the younger Professor Xavier and Patrick Stewart as the older. Once again, Patrick Stewart as the older Professor Xavier is perfect casting.
Yep.
I really like James McAvoy as the young Professor Xavier.
He played it great. For what they wanted in the script, I thought he was perfect.
Yep.
Kind of this, he played it out of control. He looked out of control, like spiraling, pathetic. It was perfect. He did a great job.
Michael Fassbender as the young version of Eric Lensher Magneto, and then obviously Ian McKellen as the older version of Eric Lensher Magneto. I love Ian McKellen. I mean, I love Ian McKellen in this role. Continue, even though we don't see a ton of him, which is kind of sad.
Right.
But I've really enjoyed Michael Fassbender. Like he brings, that just like that because this is younger version, right? That tortured version of Eric Lensher, which it's, even though he's a villain, it's so easy to understand why he became a villain and where he's coming from. And it's hard to fault the choices that he makes because of what he's gone through.
Sure.
It's really easy to empathize what he's gone through.
Yep.
Jennifer Lawrence as Raven Darkholme Mystique.
Always has been, always will be.
Yeah, she's wonderful in the younger version. They brought back Halle Berry as Aurora Monroe Storm. For me, I was happy to see.
I've never been a fan of her as that character.
That character for me, you're right. It's not, not the same, but it was kind of nice to see her back. They didn't give her a lot to do in this film because she was pregnant at the time. So they were trying to kind of, hide around that. Nicholas Hoult as the younger version of Dr. Hank McCoy and Beast, and then Kelsey Grammer, obviously at the end, as the older version. Super, super happy with that. Rogue. Rogue only has a cameo in this, and that's Anna Paquin, and of course, she is a major part of the first 3 movies. Interesting enough, they actually filmed, Matt, about 17, 18 minutes of footage with her. That they had this whole other story where Kitty Pryde gets injured and she can't hold on to Wolverine because she's losing all this blood. And so they end up going and finding Rogue and bringing her back, and she takes over and kind of gets really involved because she can, she can touch someone and she can take someone's power temporarily. Yeah. And so they were going to have that. It ended up getting cut. I believe they did release a DVD that had that version on it as a B-side or whatever you could watch, and they called it the Rogue Cut. I kind of wasn't super sad about that. I think that would have made this movie a little more too complex, trying to fit in too many ties back to the old stuff.
Right.
In the main part, but I liked the little we see her in the cameo.
Right. Yep. Agreed.
Ellen Page as Kitty Pryde. I love the fact that they brought her back. I mean, because we see her play this role 20 years ago, and now she's 20 years later, and they're still trying to kind of keep her in that role and having her go back. I thought that was great. Yep. Peter Dinklage as Bolivar Trask. I gotta be honest, I like Peter Dinklage a lot.
Yeah, man.
I don't know that this role gave him a lot to do. I think he can chew up scenery, but in this role, I think it was just kind of limited. His influence is very important on the story, but as far as screen time that they actually need to give him to explain what's going on or whatever, they've already done that in the future. So they don't have to spend a lot of time with him. So I kind of felt sadly, we didn't get probably Dinklage at his best for this story.
That's fair. Yeah, I mean, he just played a role. Yep. I mean, it wasn't like I was watching Elf.
Right. Bobby Drake as Iceman, Shawn Ashmore, he reprises his role. It's nice to see a familiar face, that's good. And then a lot of the new people, right? Omar Sy as Bishop, he's the guy that can direct the energy bolts. You got Evan Peters as Peter Maximoff Quicksilver, hands down awesome. My favorite of the young additions in this film.
Yeah, man.
His speed and where they play that song "The Time in a Bottle" and he goes and does all the things and whatever. It was funny, it was interesting, it was amazingly shot. I love that. Josh Hellman as the younger version of William Stryker, which obviously was played by Brian Cox in the second movie. I thought that was really good. Blink, Sunspot, Warpath, Colossus. We've seen Colossus before. He's still kind of with Kitty Pryde, running with kind of that crew. But these are kind of characters that are just kind of they're there. They just really served to kind of get the plot device for how we're going to go back and tell the story, in my opinion.
Yep, agreed.
And then, of course, we get the very fan-fulfilling cameos with Famke Janssen as Jean Grey, James Marsden as Scott Summers Cyclops. Lucas Till reprises his role as Alex Summers and Havoc for a little bit in there. We get to see Toad, we get Ink, and then, of course, we get, just a couple other people that, kind of play some smaller characters throughout the movie. I think the casting in this is great. I love I love the fact that this is the old cast and the new cast, but it doesn't feel like we're passing the torch on to you. This is your movie franchise now.
Right. Yeah.
That would have been horrible for me. Like, I would have hated that.
Right.
But that's not what this was. Like, it was a true kind of, time travel-y story.
Yeah.
Go back in time and, fix something in the past and change the future. I think we talked about it, but Simon Kinberg wrote this. He then went on to, he's written some other stuff. I mean, he was kind of involved in X-Men First Class. But then he went on to go write Apocalypse and Dark Phoenix. And so he's kind of been the guy in the X-Men world for a little while now. I don't know what his future is going to be in the X-Men world, if he's going to do much writing once Marvel really fully takes over. But I will say that of the X-Men movies he's written, this by far is his best writing.
Yeah.
He did say, I read something that he said that he went and he watched Back to the Future, Terminator 2 to get an idea of time travel, and that he sat down with Bryan Singer and they set some rules for time travel to try to make it as plausible as possible in their world.
Right.
And not just totally break stuff altogether.
Yeah.
Matt, if you were to take a guess, how would you guess this movie was received? What would you guess Rotten Tomatoes has
really
this
high.
movie at?
Got to be in the 90s.
So I believe that it is sitting right at 90.
Okay. Yep.
So
that seems right.
It's pretty darn high up there.
Yeah.
The movie was made on a budget of $205 million. And do you want to take a guess at what it made during its theatrical run worldwide?
Oh, gosh. 800 million.
You're not far off, 746 million.
Oh, wow. That's the best guess I've ever had in my life, and you all heard it here.
Right? And interestingly enough, 746 million only made it the 6th highest grossing film of 2014.
What?
And it was the 3rd highest grossing film in kind of the X-Men type in the X-Men kind of world of the recent stuff.
Oh my gosh.
Do you want to take a guess at what's ahead of it?
Good grief. X-Men 2?
Nope. Funny enough.
X-Men.
Funny enough, Deadpool and Deadpool 2.
Okay. I wasn't even thinking Deadpool. Right. That's not even fair. That makes sense now. Deadpool and Deadpool 2.
Right.
Okay.
So, I just, I thought I'd bring that up there. The original story that this is based off of is by a run by Chris Claremont, and he is very notable for the X-Men series. He's written a lot of some of the biggest stories in the X-Men comics. And he didn't create Wolverine, but Chris Claremont, when he took over the X-Men stuff in the early 80s, 81, he really helped define the future of what Wolverine would be and helped write some of his best stuff. And so just kind of interesting. I mean, obviously we know Stan Lee and Jack Kirby created the X-Men, but this was based off of the John Claremont story, Days of Future Past from 1981. For a little history, so to speak.
Yeah.
I don't know, Matt, looking at all of this, I've, rewatching this movie, I gotta say, this is my favorite X-Men movie.
I agree.
I think X-Men 2.
Yeah, X-Men 2 is right there, though, for me.
And
I love that movie.
First Class, those three are all superb X-Men movies. But I think that Days of Future Past is above them. It's my favorite. Of course, you can bring in you've got the super long version, X-Men Origins Wolverine, The Wolverine, Logan, Deadpool,
Okay,
Deadpool
Logan was
2.
really good. I forgot
Like,
about Logan.
those are all X-Men movies. You got Apocalypse, Dark Phoenix, and New Mutants. So, like, there's a whole lot that are technically all X-Men movies that Fox did that are
Right.
Marvel properties.
Yeah.
But Days of Future Past is my favorite.
It's excellent. Top to bottom, I agree. Cool.
Yeah, I'm gonna say that if I'm giving it a grade, it is an A.
If I'm giving it a grade, it's an A. I'm not giving it the A+,
no,
but I'm giving it the A.
Yeah, there's a couple parts in it that I'm like, it could have been a little tighter, or they could have
Right.
did a few things. So it's not a perfect movie all the way through,
Agreed.
but it's an amazing movie. It's a fun movie. So
good.
Super Friends, I want to say, go back and rewatch this movie. Like, first of all, I think it's worth going back and getting back into the X-Men movies again, watching them again, going back if you're into comics and starting to read some of that, because I really do think that we're going to start seeing a lot more of the X-Men, not in the next year, not in the next 2 years, but within the next 5 years, I think we're going to have some sort of an X-Men movie in the MCU.
Absolutely.
And I think it would be good to kind of go back and refresh your memory of how good some of these movies were and how amazing Days of Future Past is.
Amen, brother.
All right, Matt, I think our question of the week has got to be this. Super Friends, what is your favorite X-Men movie?
Yes.
It can be anything from X-Men all the way to New Mutants. And I'm just talking the live action movies. I mean, I know there's animated movies and stuff that people love. There's the animated cartoons. I'm just talking the live action movies from 2000's X-Men to 2020's New Mutants. What is your favorite X-Men title? I think Matt and I, no surprise here. It's Days of Future Past. It's the reason why we chose this. But we want to hear from you. Let us know at all those normal places, and we will get to that. We will talk about that. Your answers next week. Matt, this is episode 199. Next week is episode 200 live on Twitch. We're gonna be doing that thing, man. So we'll just a reminder, get us your questions. We get those questions in ahead of time so we can read them. We're going to answer your questions for our discussion. We're going to talk about some stuff. We want to hear from you. So let us know. That's facebook.com/FortofNerd. It's Twitter @FortofNerd, Instagram FortofNerd. It's our email, fortofnerd@gmail.com. You can send us a voicemail, 801-477-7687. You can get on Discord and you can ask us. And you can also ask your question live on Twitch when we record. I won't be doing all the normal things I do on Twitch with all the alerts and this and that. But if you have a question and you want to submit it when we get to that portion, we will also take questions live. So anyway, Matt, 199 in the books. Next week's 200. It's a big one.
Yeah, baby.
Well, from all of us here at the Fortress of Nerditude to all of you out there, wherever you may be, may the Force be with you.